Okay, you're live.
Awesome. Hey everybody, what's up? I'm Jill Black, celebrity artist with Joico, and I am actually visiting Salt Lake City right now, working on some clients. So I am here at the Ivory Salon and Suites. They were gracious enough to host us and BTC today. So today's live is all about toning. I feel like so much of our education is based on our foil placement, which don't get me wrong, it's super, super important. But I wanted to kind of switch things up a little bit today and showcase something, a toning application I've done on my beautiful model, Allie. Her hair is, we're still a little bit damp, but I wanted to show you the after placement and then work on a doll head with toners, just so that way I can kind of explain how I get those melted sort of natural, effortless looks. So today's live will be short and sweet and to the point, so thank you for being here. We have done Allie's hair. Allie's like I've done a highlighted technique on her that I actually taught on BTC University on Wednesday. So it's there. If you want to see the exact foil placement and how I achieved this, it is there for you. But I'm going to show you guys how I'm softening those hairlines, making sure that we still get that beautiful pop, but we don't get a harsh line as we tone. So as we move, if you guys have questions or if you want to see the technique I'm doing on the doll head and you want to see it live on her, please jump into the comments section. And I have Rachel helping me out with all of the comments and questions moving forward. If you can't see anything, make sure you speak up. These lives are for you guys, okay? So I am using Joico color today, and they have in their Blonde Life, they have relaunched some new shades, which I've been super excited about, loving how these turn out. So I really want to show you guys, I'll teach you kind of what toners I'm using and how I'm using them. There's a few different ways, obviously, right, that we can tone. We're going to be doing, we have melting techniques, we have tapping techniques, we have shadowing, we have back tapping, all these terms, right? And so I really wanted to get down in there and show you guys exactly how I'm doing that and how I do it on my own without using an assistant too. The Blonde Life new launch that they have is mixed with, their Lumashine is mixed with a 5 volume, and this now has coconut oil directly in the product. Now, I'm not measuring this out because I'm using this on a doll head that I'm tossing. So normally though, you would mix this a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, I'm just pouring this in here for some consistency. A 1-to-1 ratio that you use with this. And these toners come in a few different shades now too. So we have a 10N, we have a 10SB, a 9V, a 9SB, an 8N, and clear. Okay, so those are all of the newer shades as of right now that the Blonde Life line is offering. Now, what I'm going to first kind of demo here is when I'm working on my own, I really like to visualize the back of the head in a V pattern as I move, okay? So I'm going to be taking her clip out so I can work quickly. I always will tone on damp hair, and I'm really going to consistently keep my brush at a V, okay? Now this is going to give me that melting technique. Everything is dropped in a V shape, and typically I would step from side to side on my client, right? I'd stand here, and then I would swing over and I'd step to the other side. For camera purposes, I'm just turning my brush so that you guys can see that I'm keeping everything angled at a V. And what this does for me is it just gives me a full proof of getting that melted effect. The other thing you gotta remember is, how did you foil? What was your foil pattern, okay? Did you drop everything in a V when you were foiling? Did you go on horizontal lines? Because the biggest thing when you go to tap is to make sure that you're mimicking those lines and you're melting out anything that feels harsh, okay? So I'm taking this all the way up, and then I'm giving myself a body part, okay, as far as what my guide is. On her, I'm using just the base of her hairline. On this side, for what I want to draw down, because I want this back area to feel melted, Okay, this is not what I would consider a tap. And I wouldn't almost even consider this shadowing. Okay, because I'm really, really dropping this down. I want that color, that lightness and brightness that I put up in here to just melt into what zone 2 is going to be on her. Okay, so if this is zone 1, right, you can see it's hitting to here. And on this long hair, I still have a zone 2 and I still have a zone 3. So I'm going to be working in that direction all the way kind of up the back of the head. And as you can see, I'm doing this by myself. I'm taking V sections and I'm only doing one side at a time and really wrapping up those ends and so they're out of my way. Okay, that's really, really important. After you've gone through all this work to get those ends light, and then you go and you get toner on them, you just want to be very, very mindful that you're working clean, and that's going to help you work quicker. So you'll see dropping this down, taking my V shape, and then just with one hand, as I wrap this up, I'm making sure I grab all those ends, and they're going back and out of the way. So I'm really never taking my left hand, because I'm right-handed, I'm never taking my left hand off of my client's head as I'm working. Okay, now I'm kind of, for this next section, I'm going to her ear, okay? I'm going to right to the back of her ear for the rest of that melt. And if you use body parts as you go, I mean, I'd be a little bit more careful if this is a real person too, be a little more mindful that we're not painting our clients' ears. But if you're using those body parts as a way to stay balanced, it's another way that you can just work that much quicker throughout the head as you go. And you know that then you still have enough hair to have a zone 2 and a zone 3. I'll continue this all the way up the back side of that head, that same motion. And then I'm just kind of slightly doing, bottom of the ear to then the top of the ear as I move up the head so that my melt gets a little bit less and less. So I'm not dragging it down so much. Okay, let's talk about the difference between melting and shadowing. A shadow to me is more if you were to put your client in the chair, okay, and you stand behind her like so, and if you were to take your hands over and kind of do this with her, okay, so you're taking away this bright, direct lighting on top, that to me is what's creating a shadow. So I always talk about that with my client. I talk about, okay, do you want to feel like you're still seeing some of the lightness and the brightness on top and we just cast a small shadow? And so I'll literally do this in the chair so they understand. Or I say to them, or do you really want to see the lightness and brightness coming from down around your face and kicking forward? That to me is more of a melt where I'm going to create my shadow plus my formula number 2 for my melt, and then my zone 3 will handle something else. So really discussing that in your consultation and showing them the difference between the melts and the shadows. They don't need to know like technical terms and they don't need to know exactly what that means. Just for you, it's a great guide to be able to do that, to help visually give your client an understanding of what it is they're going to see as their final result. So what that means for then my application, I would continue the same way up the head in the V pattern that I'm moving. And what I'll do is I'm just going to barely hit the round of their head, okay? And that would be the whole way. I would do that from the start of this application to the end of it. My biggest tip with a shadow, okay, is that you make sure still you're working in a V, and then you're not doing any horizontal lines as you work to the side. So this is still going to remain in that V section, and I'm almost pushing that forward, and I'm just working to the round of her head, and then I'm stopping, because that's the shadow that my hand creates, right? So this, I'm going to continue to take those corners off, so that this kind of will give me the V sectioning, will kind of give me that instant drop, as long as I don't try to start working straight up the head off that center part, okay? So really make sure you're keeping these sections as you slice. If you can see, I'm coming as a diagonal back across her head. So when this hair falls, and I'm taking that forward and it falls back into this position, I have more of a drop and a point at my V. Working really clean is how you guys are gonna move faster through the hair, especially if you're working on your own. I'm using the really big brush from Joico just when I'm doing kind of this, either my tapping or my melting, and then I will switch to a bottle after that. I just like how the application, it kind of helps me just give me a little bit more control. Okay, so this last section I'm splitting in half, and you can see I'm still over directing that to the side. I don't want to go down the center part and create a solid horizontal line here. I want everything to have and remain in that teardrop shape. Okay, so there's a shadow method, and then all through here is that melting method. As you can see, I started changing it up. That's the other thing you can do too. If you have if you have a client that's pretty dark and you don't really want those highlights popping off right off the back of her head, you can also go in and mix up your toning methods, right? Do some melting through here, do some tapping through here. I do that all the time with my clients, switching up the result. And also sometimes, we get in there, we're highlight, and you're like, whoa, that got so light in the back, I really need to soften. Mixing up your toning applications is really where you're gonna create an all over, more custom, result for your client. Okay, let's move to the side. Again, I don't have perfect body positioning here when I'm trying to do this with you guys. Moving into the side, I wanna talk about kind of a different approach than what I normally see here. I think what we forget is the hair lays this direction, right? So I've seen a lot of people pull the hair back away from the face, but if you're doing this at the bowl, you really can pull the hair towards the face, okay? And that way you're hitting the top side of the hair. It's almost like in the back, we're hitting that top side, and so you get this beautiful melt happening through the back. I don't know if you guys can see on my client now. Her hair is still wet back here. I didn't have time to finish that for you guys, sorry. But you can see I've created much more of a melt in here than what I've created on the side. I've let kind of this be more of my shadow technique, and this all in here be more of my melt. And also we're tapping on the top side of that hair. So it's really difficult when you have your client sitting up to be back tapping through the whole thing. But the side is where I feel like it's really important to do that. So sometimes I'll come in here and I'll take the front section and I'll pull out sort of what it is I need to tackle, right? So if I have a girl that really wants to have a super, super bright face frame, then I'm gonna leave this a little bit heavier through here, okay? So what you need to be mindful of is when you're going to clip this out of your way, or if you're at the bowl, you don't need to, you just push this back on the wet hair. I'm gonna make sure I'm clipping into zone 2 so that I don't have any product on my brush. What I'll do here, I'll switch to a smaller brush, and I'm only going to back tap, okay? So hopefully you guys can see this. I'm coming in here, I'm staying on that angle, and I'm only going to back tap that hair. This is the hair, like I said, that you see, right? I mean, yes, we pull this into a ponytail, but she really wants that money piece to pop. So I would only back tap, okay? This is what I call back tapping. I'll go a little less through there, and then I'll slowly start to drag it down. So again, I stay on this angle as I work. When she's back at the bowl, this is all she's gonna be laying back. This will be much easier. It won't be hanging in her face, or you kind of are gonna hold, you're gonna back tap, and then you just gently lay it next to her hairline. For camera purposes, I'll show you too how I would do and tackle through this top section now that we've back tapped through that hairline. What I wanna make sure I do when I'm tapping through now, this first quadrant right here, is I'm gonna continue to take my sections on this diagonal. Just like I did in the back, I'm gonna mimic that same thing so that when this hair lays, I'm not creating any square or horizontal lines, okay? I'm not tapping like this. Everything is going to come up and away, and it's going to kind of crisscross off the back of her head, okay? So when I come in here, we'll first create a little tap so you guys can kind of see what the tapping, what the shadowing looks like, okay? And if I wanted to then mimic that and melt it, I'd drop this hair to kind of see, okay, what's my goal? How much do I need to melt? And typically what I'll do is take that very front hairline and I'll try to connect to what's happening through the back. Okay, so if this is my melt here, and that's my tip, or my money piece hairline, I want my connection to go to there. Okay, so that is top of her ear. You can see right here, would be a great guide for me to use as I move up the head. And I just find that if you use more of like a body part, it's easier to stay balanced, right? Rather than be like, oh, I need to do, 3 inches down, and then you get chatting with your client. Next thing you know, you're like, oh gosh, should I do 2 inches? When did I change it? So it's just a very easy visual. Okay, so now with me taking this back, if I have really coarse or dense hair, I'm actually gonna hit both sides, right? On our fine girls, we don't need to do that as much. We don't need to hit both sides because we know our product, we take a thin enough section, our product will penetrate through and go on both sides. But if you have really coarse hair, I really recommend doing that. I'm taking a section all the way from the top to the top of her ear here, okay? And I'm taking that all the way and over, directing that back, creating more depth here and less through the top, okay, as we continue to work. I'm going to continue and taking those diagonal backs. If this is too much hair for you, right, we have some clients that have much bigger heads, and that's not I don't mean that in a mean or bad way, it is what it is, right? We have to learn to work on rounded surfaces. We have to learn to work on, just different head shapes. So if you have somebody that has way too much hair in this section, that's okay. What I would do is let me actually show you guys in the next section. Taking that back, what I would do is just try to take that whole section for control, and I would split it in half then, okay? And I'd rest this back out of my way. Very gentle rest. I would tackle the lower side first, just for gravity purposes, right? Take this back here. I'm going just to the top of her ear. Remember, I have my guide happening. And as I'm working forward, okay, I'm creating that beautiful shadow that's gonna sit right behind those bright front hairline pieces. Then I would go in and I would tackle this second piece, just so you don't feel like you are out of control with the hair or your placement. Toning is that like refining step to your highlight placement. You really don't want to feel like you're really overworking the hair in the toning phase. You really are just refining your highlight placement. So this really shouldn't be a stressful time. Like, I understand that our toners and the way that our industry has evolved, it's like toning, and it's true. It is very true, but in my opinion, it refines our foil work. So I think that taking the time to just getting your foil placement right, making sure that hair is lifting properly, that's really what's going to make the toning that much more easy for you, and just kind of the chill point. That's where at the bowl you can kind of relax, let the toners do their job, and then really just kind of give your client that custom hair color that probably she showed you, right? That she brought in this picture and she's like, oh, I really want this. And that's, I think, exactly where your work comes in and can really shine. So I'm going to take this all the way up to where I meet with my back tapping. Make sure that every little hair counts in here. Make sure you're getting every little piece. And knowing that this right in here is what's going to be that veil that sits over the top of your hairline highlights right there, give that a good little shadow. Don't be afraid to get in there and shadow down the highlights. Typically, I would only melt this section and go into that melting phase if someone's really wanting that money piece to completely stand out from the rest and not be as veiled and shadowed, okay? So hopefully those three, right? We have our melting, okay, which is gonna drop down lower. We have our tapping, okay, which is just like when you're going in and just tapping the top of that highlight. And then you have your shadowing, okay, and then we go like this and we're casting a shadow. And then your back tapping is your tapping, but it's only on the back side of that hair. The only place I do that is the hairline here, and I'll do it on the interior hairline on my brunettes. Sorry, my blondes, but not on my brunettes. On my brunettes, I'll do front and back because we don't need as much like pop when they pull their hair into a ponytail. Okay, so hopefully all that is making sense so far. I only have a couple more things to touch on. Let's move into now toning out zones 2 and zones 3. So what I did on her was an 8N on this doll. I actually did this on my my real life, right? You guys can't even see her. Real life, shadowed her with, I did shadow work through here with an 8N. I did melting through the back, both quadrants, I would say, in the back. I did it melting with 8N. And I always start in the back as well, just like I did on my doll head, and let that work up. Okay, 8N. Now, what I want to do, so I can create this perfect sort of shadowing. Sorry, I got so many things happening, right? Okay, so yes, she's still wet through here. Obviously, you guys can see it. I don't want to touch it with my gloves. But what I want to happen in here is because naturally, right, we're not as light through this section as we are like on the ends. This is now where I'll go in. I'll show you on the doll head, and I'll move into my bottle. Okay, this is where I do the bottle work. I take her back to the bowl. Most of the time at 901 in West Hollywood, we have like a whole color bar where we'll do all of our tapping there. So she's not at my main station. But when I move into my bottle work, I'll take her back to the bowl. And this is kind of how we're gonna, actually I'll keep her this way so you guys can see. This is now my doll head. This is risky, huh? I'm toning her right next to I gotta work very clean. Okay, this is now where I'll work into that zone 2. Okay, and this is one of my favorite things to do. I've now mixed up 10N in the new Joico blonde knife. Okay, you guys can see all their new toners here. We have 10N, 10SB, 9V, 9SB, 8N, and clear. I find so far these toners work pretty quickly for me. So that's another reason I didn't want to do this live on my girl, because I just felt like I needed to be able to explain steps and things. But now what happens is when she's back in the bowl, I take these sides and I just rest them over. And any place I've done any of my melting work is where I'm going to take in and now work into my zone 2 with my bottle. Okay, so I'll kind of split the hair. And I'm using 10N. On this doll head, she wasn't lightened enough for a 10N, but just doing this for demo purposes. Okay, now I'm going to coat zone 2 with my 10N, and I'm really just going to work that in with my hands. I'm going to be mindful, knowing where my melt starts. Yes, I want to go up to it, but I'm not in there rubbing it yet. Okay, I'm really just about getting that color on. First, we'll go in and work the hair later. Okay, so I want to come and tackle all of what I would consider my melting area, and that's where I'm going to start. So that way I'm creating more of a drop in pigment in here, because this is going to sit on the longest, right? So as I'm working through here, yes, I'm only working with a 10, but I'm going to end up letting this section in here process longer than what I'm letting my sections as I work up the head. Okay, so once I feel like I have my zone 2, now I'm going to come in with my clean hand. Okay, this side has been holding my bottle, so it's clean. I'm going to come in and just lightly smudge those sections together. This hand is completely saturated, so I'm keeping that hand off of up here. I don't want to mix a ton of 10 up into where I've just been melting, where I'm trying to drop the color down. So being really mindful of that, and I'm just slowly kind of working that hair in. Like I said, when you're at the bowl, this tends to stay out of your way a little bit better, so you can then see really where you're getting a good drop. Okay, then once I feel like that's been applied, I'm going to start working into my tap section. Okay, being mindful too of when you're working on those sections, okay? Don't just take this and dump it all over. Be as mindful as possible of where you had shadow happening and where you had root melting happening. Okay, taking all of this. I typically would melt past the round of the head here. That's one thing too, you guys don't forget, working on that round surface. You don't want to create anything that looks like a harsh line through here. And the other thing too I want to touch on is like when you photograph your work, try not to judge yourself too harshly because everything changes, right? It depends. Maybe she's standing under more like an awning, okay? And it's going to change everything. Even your hands in the lighting when you're in the chair are going to change the results. So really, when you go outside and you want to critique your own work and you want to learn from it, just stand and look at it and examine it in the light. Walk around, see indoor lighting, outdoor lighting. It's not always about the photograph. Yes, we need that for Instagram, and yes, we need that for our lives. But when you're learning and you're trying these new techniques, just see it in real life and really just try to visualize it that way instead of through the camera. Okay, so I continue to work, okay, all through this until my zone 2. I'm going to do this in one big chunk, but I wouldn't normally do that just to help this live move along for you guys. Okay. And then again, being mindful you don't get too much of this up in any of your shadowed areas. That's why when you're picking this up and you're looking clean, like I just didn't for a second, you're not just going all over the head with this, okay? I feel like I do see that a lot. People have a tendency to just be like, okay, finishing touches, and they just go for it. But you have to be mindful, especially with the volume at 5 volume, that can change and tweak what you have going on in your melting area. Okay, once I feel like I have all through the back, and again, I'm using those body points to kind of create that melt. So you see how now I have more depth already through under here because this isn't being shadowed as much as what's under there. So it's creating more dimension for me just with that technique alone, using melting versus shadowing. I would continue to work all the way around the head, taking these sections, okay, until I get to my tapped section. Now, all of this tapped section is going to stay forward, and it's not going to get any melting. It is only tapping and only shadowing. Okay, so let me show you on my actual real life alley here what that's kind of doing. So if you guys can see through the side how much lighter and brighter this is all happening, and then around her hairline as well. Sorry, again, I have my gloves on. So, but that stays bright all the way down and connects to the back, and it has this gradual, progression to the color. That's the same thing that you want to mimic when you are integrating these 2 different techniques. So now once I have this completely, all this is all going to be down to my zone 2, okay, again, and I'm working now only top of the ear, okay, so just for live purposes. Now do you see how I have this V happening instantly for me? As I let that sit, it's going to do its thing. I'm going to watch it. With these toners specifically, I've been finding that I'm loving the result at 5 minutes. Now that's going to be different for everybody because it all depends on how high you're lifting your color, right? So we know we need to tone level on level. You can always use fillers and things, and that's where you can kind of break the rules a little bit with where you are choosing your number from, so at least you get some pigment, but it will not cancel completely out unless you're toning level on level. So once I sort of let this sit, then on my model, what I would do, or what I did on Ellie, and what I would do here is I'm going to switch now to my clear, okay? If you lift a blonde and she's beautiful and pristine and like right where you want her to be, and especially now that we're moving out of so many blondes being so platinum, right, and so ashy, I love to finish my zone 3 and my hairlines with clear. Clear and 5 volume, it seals down my cuticle, it makes it bright and shiny. That's what I would go back in at the bowl after I'm happy with where this is sat. and I work back to the very beginning again, all the way to the back. I'm gonna go through my ends with clear. Okay, I want everything to feel refined. I want everything to have the same amount of shine to it. So I'll go through my sections, and again, being mindful not to move into the other zones. It's okay if you want it to be completely saturated, so of course it's okay if it overlaps a little bit, but you're just really gonna take that clean hand to then be able to kind of brush and melt that in, and use your working hand and your clean hand as you move through. Now that clear is gonna move higher up the head, right? So as we go, we're gonna continue with that same shape. We're not, even though everything looks dark and saturated, knowing that we've worked with an 8, a 10, and our clear, we're gonna have that perfect melt happening. Now the only other thing I would say is once I've hit clear through my hairline, okay, this one's really key. I'll go in here, she's at the bowl, so I'm not doing this in her face. This all will become clear all the way down, okay? Now, for my back tapping that I did in here, I'll flip her head, I should flip the hair, I should say, back into the bowl. The only other thing I'll do is I will lightly kind of smudge right at her hairline. Okay, this now has clear in with that 8 end, so I'm almost now making like a 9, right? So I'm just slightly smudging that. I'm making sure every highlight has had something on it, whether it's now this mixture from the 8 and the clear, or it's got clear on there, because I still want it to feel soft, and I still want it to seal down that cuticle. If you have, for any reason, a highlight that's just like, bow, right? You're like, woo, maybe I didn't quite soften that as much as I should have. That's okay. At this point, bring this back. Okay, you're kind of analyzing the hairline, because this is what the client sees, right? They're gonna see this all the time. You're kind of analyzing, go back to your tap that you originally had, use your smaller brush, okay? Put a little bit of product on the corner of your brush and just lightly give it a little softness, okay? Just boop, boop, like whoopsie, I got a little aggressive there, or ooh, that didn't quite highlight like I wanted to. Give yourself just a little detail work to make that hairline perfect, that what your client sees when they pull their hair up. You just don't want any of like, what about this piece, right? I feel like at some point in our careers, we've all had that. Well, this is just that little refining and that detail work to make that happen. Now, don't be scared, because you have clear in here, right? So that's gonna, number one, slow it down. It's not going to deposit as quickly as what has happened on the tap and the root melting. So you're okay to put those little spots there. Let them sit 1-2 minutes, kind of, give it a little love tap in there, slowly soften that down. Now I can rinse, right? When I am happy, usually what I'll do is I'll come to the root melt and the root tap, and I'll really kind of smudge that out, move that hair, okay? Really move it so you can see exactly what's happening. It gets very deceiving, right, when you're putting this product on there. And if you even need to take that extra step to give a little rinse, use a wet towel, rinse a section, towel dry real good, make sure you where you're at, and then you go ahead and rinse. Always rinse starting in the back, okay, rinsing through here, rinsing the same way that I applied. And again, that's just keeping it nice and clean as you work, making sure nothing dark is rinsing on your hairline and on the ends. And again, if I just can't emphasize enough, working clean also helps you work quicker, okay? So I typically do work with an assistant in the salon, but I also think that it's really important. At the beginning of my career, I didn't. And a lot of us want to be able to achieve these same looks, right? Like, we don't want to be limited to our work just because we only have our 2 hands instead of 4 hands, right? So it is possible. You can always throw clear into each of your formulas if you need to slow anything down, or if you feel like, man, I just can't get through a head of hair as fast as that toner is working, then don't be afraid to throw a splash of clear in there. Give yourself that extra time and just a little bit more safety net. I feel like it's a good rule of thumb to do when you're using new toners as well. All right, so here is sort of that kind of finished, really, really soft hairline. on Allie. Again, I would call her a blonde, right? But naturally, like I said, she's like pretty much at a 6. So it's really important that she feels like she's not gonna have this harsh, aggressive line as she grows out. All right, you guys, so if there are no questions for me, then I am going to get Allie's hair all finished up and styled. I'm gonna make sure that I post some before pictures, share formulas, get some after pictures up there, and show you guys exactly how this all turned out. So thank you so much for tuning in. Go check out the highlighted version of this education on BTC University and my timeless blonde, and then here is the toning application for you. Thanks for having me, guys. See you next time.